right. Can you hear me? Everybody back? We're good? My mic's working? Very good. All right. What we're going to cover today, we have the 3 PROC chairs, and what I hope to do today is to cover how they operate and how their PROCs operate in their state. I'm going to be asking a series of questions to each of them. If anybody out there wants to follow up with a question or wants something clarified, raise your hand. Rebecca will come around and shove a mic in your face, and you'll be able to ask the question so everybody can hear. Okay? So what I want to do, I've got my notes up here somewhere. Here we go. We heard earlier today that in Rick's session that a lot of PROCs do different things. Some look at the overall process. Some get involved with the RABs and I've had Mason on one of my PROCs, one of my RABs, when I was working with Nick Papp. So I know how he gets involved. So we have all different levels. So I want them to answer how or respond to these questions with points in mind. By the way, we have not rehearsed this. In fact, one of our panelists was told 5 minutes ago, you volunteered for this, so.
Some people have trouble with rules.
Yeah, okay.
And instructions.
But as you're answering the questions, try and work into your response how it relates to the underlying thought process of the responsibilities of whether we've got a PROC, we've got a state board committee, and how it reflects your state's rules and regulations. Okay, so Rob, I'd like to start with you. California, big state. How many CPA firms approximately in the state? If you know, how many people on the state board? How many on your PROC?
There's over 90,000 licensees in California. So
But as far as firms, because a peer review is, you don't know.
don't know that.
Okay. How often does we have the California AE around here somewhere, right?
She had to go.
She left. Okay. I was going to ask her the question.
She would have known.
I know. All right. So how many members on your board? State board?
On the state board,
State Board of Accounting?
I believe there's probably 15,
Okay. How many people on your PROC?
7, up to 7.
Up to 7. And they are CPAs, peer reviewers? I know you answered the question earlier, but...
Yeah, all currently are practicing CPAs. California doesn't have a requirement for membership on the PROC, but for the most part, it's favored if you're at least in practice and in public accounting currently.
Okay. I'm trying to get a picture of how many reviews the state... I know California does a lot of reviews. I used to be chair of the New York, and we used to do 900 reviews a year. So
Jeez.
I'm assuming yours is sort of in this, probably a little bit higher. Tim?
I don't even know why I'm here. We're overseen by California. My wife told me it was an AA meeting, so. Our PROC's completely different. We, in Arizona, and I've mentioned to a couple of people, if you do compilations, no disclosures, it's not mandatory peer review. But you could be subject to an educational enhancement review, an EER, once out of 5 years, random.
Like a desk review?
Desk review. We have peer reviewers as committee members, 7 members on our committee. If you get selected at random, you fill out a questionnaire, you send it to us, we select 2 of your reports, and they send them to the board. The board
Okay.
then passes them out to 2 peer reviewers.
All right. So as far as the actual peer reviews, which are administered by California, you have, I think you said earlier, you have one representative on the California PROC?
Yes.
Well, yeah, but let's just clarify. So I sit on the California Peer Review Oversight Committee, but our administrating entity is Cal CPA.
Right, of course.
That's Cal CPA oversees Arizona, not my.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does Arizona State Board get comfortable with what Cal CPA is doing?
We have a member, I think he's on our RAB committee, Joe Evers, CPA from Arizona, is a member there.
Of his PROC?
Cal CPA.
Of Cal CPA. He's a member of the RAB
Right,
at Cal
I believe
CPA.
so. I think that Linda would probably know that better. But
He's a member of the Peer Review Committee
peer review committee.
Okay.
at Cal CPA.
Nadia, in Virginia, how many firms, do you know?
About 1,200 firms
1,200 firms. And how many people on your PROC?
with 5.
Okay.
PROC members.
What does your PROC do? I mean, we heard earlier today that sometimes they get involved in the RABs. Sometimes they just do what Tim's group does, which is look at the non-auditors, the non-disclosure functions. And sometimes they look at, well, what's the process? How does Virginia?
We look at it from two sides. So there's the state level where you have the administering entity, and we do observe only the peer review committee and the report acceptance body meetings. Our state meets about 5 times a year, and we have 5 members. So at least one person is at every member or at every meeting to just observe. We don't participate. We do have access to the information about a week before the meeting so that we can look through everything. If there are certain ones that we absolutely want to hear, if they have RAB meetings that are in separate rooms, we will follow that meeting and make sure that we do hear the comments and discussion around that particular review. And then also on the national side, we look at any oversight reports that are available.
The Virginia State Society, do they, all their RABs meet face-to-face? And you said about,
No, some are by teleconference.
and you get involved in those as well?
Yes, sir.
You try and hit every RAB, or
Yes.
California, you try and hit every RAB?
When California first started the PROC, we attended every RAB, but now we don't attend every RAB, but almost all.
Okay. And are you involved the way Texas is in getting into the nitty-gritty of the RAB discussion, or more of observational?
Ours is more observational, so we have confidentiality requirements in California, so we're only able to access the files really the same day as the RAB. We can go to Cal CPA's office, review the files that are going before the RAB that day, and then participate in the phone call or in the meeting itself. From an observation perspective, if we have questions, we're open. We can ask questions and do those things, but we don't have a vote or anything like that.
Now, none of you, all 3 of you are like we are. We're volunteers. Am I correct? Okay.
I get a stipend of $100 a day.
You get a stipend of 100. How much?
$100 a day.
That's what we got in New York.
$100 a meeting.
A meeting, right? Same thing. Yeah.
And travel reimbursement.
And travel. Okay. So you're all volunteers. So the administrative functions of the PROC, excuse me, is that done by the PROC members, or is there a staff person at the state board? Does the PROC have a staff person? Tim, do you want to?
Members of the State Board of Accountancy in Arizona handle all the administrative,
The members or the staff?
the staff.
The staff at the state board. Virginia? Same?
Staff.
California? So the staff does
Yeah.
that? Okay. Important question. In your state, do the rules, or if you know, do the rules require that the PROC function subject to the open meeting law? In other words, are your meetings open to the public, or are they held in closed session?
All of our meetings are open to the public. We cannot have a closed session.
Yes, same here.
Same, open? Frank, are you still here? Frank Venezia? Is New York open or closed? We have an open session called... Wait, Rebecca's running, hold on.
Thank you. We have an open session, which is called the public session, which comprises about, a half an hour to 45 minutes of our meeting, where we cover a variety of administrative things and things that are open to the general public. And then we have an executive session, which is closed to the public, where we discuss specific peer review reports, names of firms, and so on and so forth, and our follow-up procedures and what we're doing with those firms and how they've responded to us with regard to that follow-up.
Okay, thanks. As long as your mic is right there, as long as you got the mic, you guys get involved with the RABs? I know you have a gazillion RABs a year in New York.
Right, there's a lot of RABs in New York. There's 7 RABs that work with the committee, the peer review committee. They meet on a monthly basis. There's no way with 5 members on our QROC that we could get involved with the RABs. Occasionally, we will participate by telephone with a RAB meeting, but it's only on a random basis when someone has the available time to do
So
that.
when you are there, it's more observational than anything else?
It's more observational than anything else, because I'm the only currently, no, there's one other, there's 2 active peer reviewers. The other people have no history with peer review.
I know that was different a few years ago, but yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just
Okay.
add on to that. For California, legislatively, we can't have a closed session or an
No,
executive session.
That's the purpose of this.
Right,
I
but.
want to understand,
so
I want
the-
everybody to
Yeah,
understand.
specific file issues or specific firm issues go to the Enforcement Advisory Committee in California, and all enforcement actions are taken care of in that
Okay,
section.
so if, in your observations of the RABs, you see a particular firm get 2 fails in a row, well, that's for somebody else. That's not your responsibility to discuss.
That's not our responsibility, not to discuss that particular firm, but to make sure that's getting reported to enforcement or getting reported to the board, which is legislative required if they have a fail report.
So who reports it to enforcement? How does that rule work? Who has to report it?
Administrative entities, so Cal CPA reports it.
Cal CPA reports directly to the enforcement folks.
Correct.
That's part of the board, or?
Enforcement is a separate division. It's also a separate committee for the board.
Okay. All right. So you folks observe the RABs. You report back to whom?
I report actually and attend all California Board of Accountancy meetings and report
attend
at
all
those
the
meetings. Yes.
Okay. How often do you report to the board?
After every time we have a meeting, I report. And then annually, we have a written report.
A written report. Does that written report, who does that report goes to the board?
Goes straight to the board.
Do you know if it comes to NASBA?
That I don't know for sure. It's public information, so it's accessible.
Give me a second, Paul. No, I don't see her here right now. Okay, Paul?
Henry, just a comment on what was just made and maybe some help from the AICPA, but can the Cal State CPA Society report directly to the board? That should be in violation of the confidentiality
I was waiting for Jim
requirements.
Brackens to come back in the room. Jim, I don't know if you heard that. And I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. Comment was made, what do you do when you see, California, for example, their PROC observes what Cal CPA, their process, the AE's process. So my question to the PROC chair was, what do you do when you see a firm getting a fail or 2 fails in a row or something along those lines? And the response was, we don't do anything because that's not the bailiwick of the PROC. They look at the overall function of the administrative entity. However, the administrative entity, correct me if I'm wrong, somehow communicates to, I don't know if it's directly or is it through FSBA,
I'm not sure about the logistics, but all fail reports have to go to the board.
by Cal CPA. And Paul brought up the question, is that a problem? And I was,
So the question is it a problem that there's two parts to that? One, is there a problem that the PROC doesn't do anything itself? No, there's no problem. I mean, in Cal, as talking about the focus,
No,
their
that's not the
focus is where the Cal CPA Society is fulfilling its mission and doing what it's supposed to do in accordance with their standards. The other question is it a problem that the failed peer review reports, the first one, are required to go to the board, by either through FSBA or the firm sending it? That's a function of law or regulation. North Carolina has the same requirement. All firms are required by law, if they have a failed peer review, to send it to the board.
I think Paul's question is, whom sends it? Yeah, but
Okay,
I don't think
all right.
Rob is fully
Okay, is
sure.
Linda, did Linda leave? Okay.
Yes, she did.
If I'm not mistaken, California, the way their law was written, and that's why I wish Linda was here to be clear, they wrote the law that said to be a recognized administering entity in California, the administering entity is required to provide the board with a failed peer review report.
That's my understanding, too.
Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay, so it's a functional, so what happens in California is that when a firm schedules their review, they have to acknowledge that they understand that if they get a failed peer review, it will be submitted to the board. It's similar to what you do in mandatory FSBA, but slightly different. I mean, that wouldn't have been our choice. Our choice would have been that you understand that as a function of peer review, that your reports are going to be made available. It's slightly different in California. It has to be worded differently because of California law. It is still, from our perspective, from AICPA perspective, the firm has given permission. I mean, they really have no choice. If they don't sign that to schedule the review, they got to find someone else to do the peer review, and it's not going to happen. But functionally, that is the very same thing that happens with a mandatory FSBA like in Oklahoma. It really, the same process applies. Thanks, Paul. Now I understand the question or concern.
Thanks, Jim. Nadia, when your PROC sees, through its observational process, a fail or a repeat fail, what happens?
Again, we're only observing those discussions at the RAD meeting, and then the administering entity will follow through with that part of the process. We are not involved.
You're not involved in that.
piece of it. Now, we have discussed the failed reports guidance, and we are considering that as a committee and also with the board. We've just been taking our time with that.
And Jim, same question?
Yeah, we've developed a policy on consecutive uncorrected deficiencies in peer reviews that the committee's going to look at it. We're going to see if it's the same problem or something entirely different. If we feel they're not cooperating, we're going to refer them to the main board for
Okay, so
further
you can
action.
refer.
Yeah, we've discussed accelerated peer reviews as a possible solution, but that hasn't been resolved yet.
So you refer to the board and they do the enforcement thing?
Correct.
Okay. I know in New York, Frank, you were saying that you're in the process, no, I'm just commenting that you're in the process of trying to write new rules that will allow the PROC, because in New York, the board itself doesn't do the enforcement. There's another arm of the state education department that does the enforcement. But that new rules will allow the PROC to forward things to the Office of Practice, to OPD. All right, we've been talking about fails, double fails, and this is just an ad. The committee, Compliance Assurance Committee, on the NASBA website has issued this white paper, oh, it's blue. It's 2.5 pages in length, it's not a lot. It has what NASBA's Compliance Assurance Committee thinks either PROCs, enforcement arms, state boards, whomever is doing the enforcement in your state, what should be done when somebody gets other than a pass on the first time. What happens if they get a PWD or a fail after an initial PWD, and what happens if they get a fail or a PWD after a fail? So if you read through it, it's not a lot, but the original process is after an initial situation, communicate, we're keeping an eye on you. After a while, there is potential, if your state rules allow it, think about sending it to enforcement, or in the case of a fail following a fail, or a fail following a PWD, send it to enforcement for them to consider whether they need to open the case. That's on the NASBA website. All right. So you report in a written report, you report to the full board after every one of your meetings, or at every one of their meetings.
Correct.
Okay, Virginia?
We have a liaison, which is actually a board member at every one of our meetings. And so if there's anything that he feels like should be relayed to the full board, then he handles
Okay,
that
so
piece.
you have a board member sitting in on your meetings that he or she reports back.
Correct, if there's something of importance that he feels like the entire board should know. And otherwise, I report annually, I physically go to the meeting and speak and provide our report. There's also a written report, and that is posted on the NASBA website.
It's given to NASBA. Okay, Tim?
Yeah, I appear before the board annually. I do a written report, and then I follow up with insight. And then if a matter comes up, for example, mandatory peer review for comps without disclosures, I appear before the full board and talk to them.
What CAC, what the Compliance Assurance Committee would encourage all boards, PROCs to do is take these annual written reports and forward them to NASBA. Leona Johnson's our liaison for, Leona, where are you? Just you're way in the back. She's the liaison for CAC. She will get that information, coordinate it so that it's available for other states to look at for the purpose of what is a report look like, what do we want our report to our state board to look like. All right. Okay, we did that. Okay, your PROC members. You said there were 7?
Up to 7.
How long is the term?
It's 2 years, renewable for another 2 years for 3 terms. So it
So
goes 6
years
total.
max.
8, I'm sorry, 8. I can add.
No, it's my problem. Renewable for 3, so
8
what's
years,
the original 2 times
4
4?
terms,
8.
2 years each.
Okay, 8. Tim, what's the process?
Five-year sentence, and then you can renew it every 5 years.
Total of a max of 10.
No, not really. We had some people who've been on the committee over 10
5,
years.
5, 5, 5.
Yeah,
As long as.
You-
And who
as long as you
appoint-
can fog a mirror, you can pretty much, stay on it.
And who appoints the PROC members?
The state board, the
State
governor actually
So
does
it's-
it, the legislature.
So the PROC member is actually ratified by the legislature
Yeah, I
and the
believe
state
so.
board?
Yeah, because I got a
California?
letter.
California is appointed by the board.
By the state board. Virginia? By the board, and the maximum term?
3 years with the option to renew for another 3.
Maximum of 6. Okay, 6, 8, and potentially forever. Okay,
You get a life sentence.
Yeah,
life sentence.
going on 3 years as chair.
All right. All right, and these. Does the PROC deal with, I'm sorry, there was a question. Yes?
Thank you. For those states that the state board is appointing the PROC members, does that have to be done in consultation, say, with the governor's office? It seems like the board could get itself into a lot of trouble, maybe, depending on who the appointments are, if people are unhappy with them.
California, that's not required. Our process is, you'll find the board is advertising on a regular basis, looking for volunteers in each one of its areas of committees. People will send in their CVs for that and their application for it. That'll come then typically through staff. Staff vets the person to make sure there isn't any issues inside their history of their license or elsewhere. And then once they clear that process, it'll come to the chair of each of the respective committees for an interview. It's done by typically 2 people from the committee and then somebody from board staff. Once that person clears that, it's a conversation between the chair and the appointment person for the Board of Accountancy. That conversation takes place, and then typically it will go then up to the board for ratification.
I think a lot of those issues have to deal with how the state appoints the actual Board of Accountancy to begin with. For example, I know in New York, when I applied for the board, Dan Dustin was the executive director. He interviewed me, and then basically he told the Board of Regents, which is this New York's like Board of Directors for the State Education Department, which regulated all the professions. And Board of Regents said, yeah, okay, Dan said it was good. Am I right? So it all depends on, like New York, we don't go near the governor's office. I know some states it becomes very important. My current state, Florida, everything is ratified by the governor or appointed by the governor. Am I correct? The board members. Board members, yeah, okay. Okay. Are there any other questions we have on the floor that we could ask these lovely folks up here? I think we've covered what I wanted to cover. Is there anything else you want to tell the group? I think, like one of my questions was going to be, do you get involved in any other areas other than overseeing the AE? For example, one of the questions somebody wanted me to go over was, with the Department of Labor report that came out, I'm assuming the boards get involved, but does your group as a PROC, are you getting involved discussing that issue, or you're strictly looking at overseeing in your case, the Cal Society, in your case, Virginia, what they're doing?
In Virginia, we're overseeing what they're doing.
And
We're
that's
not
it.
involved at that level of
Okay.
detail.
Okay, California?
California, that report is up for, it's a topic in our next upcoming meeting.
But it's for discussion purposes.
It's for discussion purposes, mainly for the intent to see if there's other recommendations that we need to make to the board in regards to the peer review
For
process.
them to act on it, not necessarily for the peer review oversight committee to delve into what peer reviews are being done properly or improperly. Anybody out here where they have a PROC or where the board itself is looking at areas outside of, well, with PROC is looking at outside areas outside of the peer review process in their state, vis-a-vis the DOL, or are they looking at areas within the peer review process that the DOL report and other reports have sort of, singled out?
We're in Arizona, behind you here. We're getting into the SARS-21 issue with preparation engagements. The board's asked for our input on those. I believe that we are going to finally get mandatory peer review for comps with no disclosures when SARS-21 is effective. But now, if someone just does preparation engagements in Arizona, they're not going to be subject to peer review, but they're going to be subject to this EER that we do in my committee. So we've been heavily involved in that.
When you do an EER, are you looking at just the report, or are you looking at any underlying work
Just the
papers?
report.
Just the
There's a
physical-
questionnaire that goes with it too. Two-page questionnaire, what type of report, what type of entity. One was last year's fees paid, which trips up a lot of people, by the way. It's just the report. So there's sometimes we have to send out letters to ask questions if something, we didn't think something was
Okay.
correct, we can't tell because there's no disclosures.
Okay. If there are no other questions on the floor,
I'll make a comment, just one thing. In the last session, I kind of sensed that there was a little bit of grumbling in regards to working with the administrative entity. And that I think is unfortunate. And I can't endorse Cal CPA in this process just because of my role, but I really think it's important to have a strong working relationship with the administrating entity because otherwise the whole process is going to break down. If you can't have those open conversations and have that good rapport, I think it's a real problem. And if that's not working, I think it needs to be restored.
there were two comments I wanted to make in summary, and one of those had to do with that, but not on the state level, on the national level. Several years ago, when Compliance Assurance Committee was created, there were some issues that Compliance Assurance had with the AICPA. Who was going to do what, why, how was it going to get done? I think that over the years, these two groups, especially the leadership of those two groups, the peer review program and our chair here at the CAC, have learned that we're all in the same team. We work together, and together we get a better result. And I truly believe that, and I applaud them for their efforts. The other thing I wanted to mention was, the question came up earlier today, education versus enforcement, education versus punishment. I got into the peer review business 20 years ago because it was educational, and I wanted to, those of you who know me know that I'm a third-generation CPA, and my nephew is also a CPA. We have currently 6 CPAs in my family, covering, currently now 2 generations. Shortly, not that far long ago, it was 3 generations. But it was educational in nature, and that's why I got into the business. I still think today it's educational in nature, because as I've talked to some of the PROC members and some of the other peer reviewers, firms that are not doing what we perceive to be the right job think they're doing the right job, and they want to do the right job. We need to help teach them how to do the right job. And where the enforcement comes in is if somebody doesn't want to learn how to do the right job, well, they shouldn't be doing that job at all. And that's the enforcement job. But I still think we're primarily an educational program, an educational function. That is not an ASBA, that is not an AICPA idea, that's my idea. So don't blame anybody else but me.